Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm excited because I always feel like intensives are an opportunity for us to do a little bit deeper dive into the teachings. And that's what I have in mind for this morning. Some things that are maybe a little bit too expensive for just a Dharma talk. Maybe not quite the same as a class or something like that. But it will be a little bit academic in the beginning, at least. In the Buddha's teachings on social and communal harmony, the Buddha speaks to his disciples about their training. I consider these teachings the historical roots of the concept of the Bodhisattva. Monks. There are these 4 kinds of persons found existing in the world. What for? 1, one who is practicing for his own welfare, but not for the welfare of others. 2, one who is practicing for the welfare of others, but not his own welfare. 3, one who is practicing neither for his own welfare nor for the welfare of others. And 4, one who is practicing both for his own welfare and for the welfare of others. So we have to forgive the gendered language, which I'm not sure whether it's that way in the original or not, but it's here in this translation. So 1, how is a person practicing for his own welfare, but not for the welfare of others? Here, some person himself abstains from the destruction of life, but does not encourage others to abstain from the destruction of life. He himself abstains from taking what is not given, but does not encourage others to abstain from not taking what is not freely given. He himself abstains from sexual misconduct, but does not encourage others to abstain from sexual misconduct. He himself abstains from false speech, but does not encourage others to abstain from them. He himself abstains from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, but does not encourage others to abstain from them. In this way, it is in this way that a person is practicing for his own welfare, but not for the welfare of others. 2, and how is a person practicing for the welfare of others, but not for his own welfare? Here, some person does not himself abstain from the destruction of life, but he encourages others to abstain from the destruction of life, and so on, down to he does not himself abstain from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, but he encourages others to abstain from them. It is in this way that a person is practicing for the welfare of others, but not for his own welfare. 3, and how is a person practicing neither for his own welfare nor the welfare of others? Here, some person does not himself abstain from the destruction of life and does not encourage others to abstain from the destruction of life, and so forth, down to he does not himself abstain from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, and does not encourage others to abstain from them. It is in this way that a person is practicing neither for his own welfare nor for the welfare of others. 4, and how is a person practicing both for his own welfare and for the welfare of others? Here, some person himself abstains from the destruction of life and encourages others to abstain from the destruction of life. All the way down to he himself abstains from liquor, wine, and intoxicants and encourages others to abstain from them. It is in this way that he is practicing both for his own welfare and for the welfare of others. These monks are the 4 kinds of persons found existing in the world. So, also in his teachings, which is another little seed of the Bodhisattva vow I found in the original Pali teachings, a certain monk asked the Blessed One, "It is said, Bhante, a wise person of great wisdom, a wise person of great wisdom. In what way is one a wise person of great wisdom?" "Here, monk, A wise person of great wisdom does not intend for his own affliction, or for the affliction of others, or for the affliction of both. Rather, when he plans for his own welfare, the welfare of others, the welfare of both, and the welfare of the whole world. It is in this way that one is a wise person of great wisdom. So, Bodhisattva's vow, the beautiful poem we've been chanting every day in our morning service, this practice period, and this intensive, is a distillation of the path of the Bodhisattva classically described in Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, translated by the Padmakara translation group in the book, The Way of the Bodhisattva. And in the introduction, they talk a little bit about this text. Shantideva was an 8th century Indian philosopher, Buddhist monk, and scholar. As a student of the monastic University of Nalanda, one of the most celebrated Buddhist universities in ancient India, he was a most unusual student, it seems. Pema Chodron wrote that he was not well liked at Nalanda. Apparently, he was one of those people who don't show up for anything, never studying or coming to practice sessions. His fellow monks said that his 3 realizations were eating, sleeping, and shitting. They arranged to shame him by goading him into giving a talk to the entire university. He delivered The Way of the Bodhisattva, which became one of the great works of the Mahayana tradition. The introduction of the translation explains this astonishing text. According to the text's organization, the first 3 chapters, The Excellence of Bodhicitta, Confession, and Commitment, are designed to stimulate the dawning of bodhicitta in the mind. The following 3 chapters, Awareness, Vigilance, and Patience, give instructions on how to prevent the precious attitude from being dissipated. While the 7th, 8th, and 9th chapters, Heroic Perseverance, Meditation, and Wisdom, prescribe ways in which the bodhisattva, the bodhicitta, may be progressively intensified. The 10th chapter is a concluding prayer of dedication. So, the bodhisattva path begins with the arising of bodhicitta. What is bodhicitta? Citta means mind, thought, or attitude. Bodhi means enlightenment, awakening, and is cognate with the term Buddha itself. This gives us mind of enlightenment, awakening mind, the attitude of mind that tends toward and is imbued with enlightenment, the specific characteristic of Buddhahood. It should be noted that bodhicitta is not a synonym for compassion. It is a broader term in which compassion is implied. According to tradition, bodhicitta is said to have 2 aspects, or rather to exist on 2 levels. First, one speaks of absolute bodhicitta, referring to the direct cognizance of reality. This is the wisdom of emptiness, an immediate, non-dual insight that transcends conceptualization. Second, there is relative bodhicitta, by which is meant the aspiration to attain the highest good or Buddhahood for the sake of all, together with the practical steps necessary to achieve this goal. The connection between these 2 bodhicittas, the wisdom of emptiness on the one hand, the will to deliver beings from suffering on the other, is perhaps not immediately clear. But within the Buddhist perspective, as Shantideva gradually reveals, absolute and relative bodhicitta are 2 interdependent aspects of the same thing. The true realization of emptiness is impossible without the practice of perfect compassion, while no compassion can ever be perfect without the realization of emptiness. How so? In the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha's disciple Subhuti has the same question. He asked the Buddha, "It is wonderful, world-honored one, that the Tathagata thinks so much of all the bodhisattvas and instructs them so well. World-honored one, in the case of a son or daughter of a good family who arouses the thought for the supreme awakening, this is the arising of bodhicitta, how should they abide in it? And how should they keep their thoughts under control?" You may be wondering that same thing. The Buddha replied, "Well said indeed, Subhuti. As you say, the Tathagata thinks very much of the bodhisattvas and instructs them well. But now listen attentively, and I will tell you how those who have set out on the Bodhisattva path should abide in it, and how they should keep their thoughts under control. So be it, world-honored one. I wish to listen to you. The Buddha said to Subhuti, all the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas who undertake the practice of meditation should cherish one thought only. When I attain perfect wisdom, I will liberate all sentient beings in every realm of the universe, whether they be egg-born, womb-born, moisture-born, or miraculously born. Those with form, without form, those with perception, those without perception, and those with neither perception nor non-perception. So long as any form of being is conceived, I must allow it to pass into the eternal peace of nirvana, into that realm of nirvana that leaves nothing behind, and to attain final awakening. And yet, although immeasurable, innumerable, and unlimited beings have been liberated, truly no being has been liberated. Why? Because no bodhisattva who is a true bodhisattva entertains such concepts as a self, a person, a being, or a living soul. Thus, there are no sentient beings to be liberated and no self to attain perfect wisdom. Furthermore, Subhuti, in the practice of generosity, a bodhisattva should be unsupported. He or she should practice generosity without regard to sight, sound, touch, flavor, smell, or any thought that arises in it. Subhuti, thus should a bodhisattva practice generosity without being supported by any notion of a sign. Why? When a bodhisattva practices generosity without being supported by any notion of a sign, his or her merit will be beyond conception. Subhuti, what do you think? Can you measure the space extending eastward? No, world-honored one, I cannot. Subhuti, can you measure the space extending toward the south, or west, or north, or above or below? No, world-honored one, I cannot. Subhuti, so it is with the merit of a bodhisattva who practices generosity without cherishing any notion of a sign. It is beyond measure, space. Subhuti, a bodhisattva should persevere one-pointedly in this instruction. So this is from Musang's translation version of the Diamond Sutra. So that's a bit of the traditional basis for the concept of a bodhisattva. But let's turn to something more contemporary, Joko's teachings and her practical down-to-earth wisdom from ordinary wonder. Do good. Sacrifice. In Zen practice, we spend a lot of time sitting. You notice that. If we hurt, we sit. If we don't hurt, we sit. We sit long hours. Do you think of those hours of sitting as sacrifice? A student said to me, well, I know you've been very ill and I know you're just sacrificing your life for your students. That surprised me. I don't think of practice as sacrifice. I don't think of teaching or sitting as sacrifice. I think what I'm doing is fun. Because sitting is the same thing as living. In practicing and in living with more awareness, all we are sacrificing is our illusions. Say you get up early to sit in meditation when you really don't want to. A bed is warm, and you just really would like to stay in it and sleep some more. But you get up because sitting makes your life whole. The practice begins the very second you get up. Because in that moment, you have enough awareness to see that the sitting, in the long run, is what you want to do. You aren't losing something by sitting, you're finding your wholeness. In Buddhism, there is the concept of the Bodhisattva vow, a commitment to liberate all sentient beings. That's the idea. The reality might be that we'd rather go to the corner and get a hot fudge sundae. If our reality is that we'd rather be elsewhere, then we will likely feel annoyed that we have to give up something in order to be there for someone else. The Bodhisattva vow can be an idealized goal, a head on top of our own head, another excuse to keep us from experiencing our life as it is. A genuine part of us is drawn toward easing suffering. This is great, as long as we don't get caught in the idea of sacrificing ourselves. Sometimes it isn't appropriate to take on someone else's suffering. We'd be better off letting them go through their own pain and learn their own strength. If we define our lives as giving up something, we're almost sacrificing. When we live our lives with compassion and awareness, we realize we're actually gaining a lot in any situation. We express and act from compassion for its own sake. And in turn, our life becomes rich and full. So Flint's going to take over from this point. It's our collaborative endeavor.
So I have a practical question before I do very much, and a technical question for those of you online. So here's the practical one for those of us here. Is there anyone in the room right now which would prefer that, no, can I take your hand for a second? That prefer not to have anyone touch them? Are you worried about that in any way? I mean, a simple thing like this? Okay. And those of you online, oh, you can't actually, but you can put your hand up on the side. And the other thing you can do is you're gonna have to employ your mirror neurons. And notice when I ask people to do something in here and see what happens inside of you, okay? So let's see that. So everybody in the room, someone close by, just simply make contact with them. That's all. But you start looking at each other, smiling. What's wrong? Imagine that you are offering bodhichitta, like Peg talked about, and all this way, to the person next to you through your hand. You're offering your kindness and your wish that they be liberated by the touch. It's embodied. And now realize that if you're doing that to them, guess what they're doing to you? They're offering it back to you. And then as you gently release the contact, notice what remains and also what you let go of.
Let's do that again.
This is in puppy pile, yeah. So what I'm going to do is there's another part of Joko that just follows what she read, and I'm going to continue on, and then I'm going to back up to some other teachings, okay? These are Joko's words. It's easy to save the world in your head. There's no trouble at all to have noble thoughts about this or that way of saving things until we embody this desire and have the felt experience of living it in our daily lives. It's just another strategy, another escape. She goes on. You may say you vow to save all sentient beings. How many are there? There are millions of them. If you're trying to save all sentient beings, you're trying to fix something. And this is so classical Joko here. If you're trying to save all sentient beings, you're trying to fix something, usually in yourself. And we've been talking about the vow, internal and external, which is often that expression is really about what you're trying to fix. The only way you can save all sentient beings is to be your true self. When you are your true self, at least a fair amount of the time, because no one I've met yet is there 100% of the time, you begin to be a beneficial presence in the world. As Suzuki Roshi would say, when you are Buddha, when you are you, Buddha is Buddha. It's the same teaching. She goes on. To be of service is a koan in and of itself. What does it mean to serve yourself? Remember the people that she was talking about? Serve yourself, serve someone else, and serve the situation. This is Bodhichitta and the big. It doesn't mean to be running around straightening everything out and trying to help everyone. Even though they need straightening. Some people wear themselves out serving others. When your health is threatened and your equilibrium is threatened, it's difficult to truly serve. Serving others includes taking care of yourself. Keep my order here. She goes on, to be of service sometimes means to be very helpful to someone else. Sometimes it means to give up almost everything you have. And sometimes it means to keep everything you have. A good practice leads to service and to doing the work. And that can look very different on different people. But one way to know you're doing this work is that it feels spacious, not contracted, or not like people. If you're not being yourself, you're not being of service. It means you actually open, not close down. You talked about a larger container, you know? One last little bit from her. Now, some of you think it's enough to say, I really don't want to serve anybody. And I know you all have that somewhere, but you don't have to raise your hand. That may be honest, but it doesn't have any integrity in it. Service and willingness to do the work flows naturally out of good practice. It's a natural flow that comes, not you doing it. Those are my words. This doesn't mean we work all the time. It means that there is less separation between being in service, doing the work, and truly living our lives. They become the same thing. We chant in the monastic no chants, no giver, no receiver, no gift. The emptiness of the three symbols. Oh, that starts to break down. And these are some words from another teacher that many of you probably know, Rachel Naomi Rimmon. She has a beautiful essay, which I've given out in a lot of my groups on in the service of life. I'm going to read just a tiny bit. The wholeness in us serves the wholeness in others and the wholeness in life. The wholeness in you is the same as the wholeness in me. Service is a relationship between equals. You're not helping those poor people, you know. When I serve, I see and trust that wholeness. That's faith. That's Bodhichitta. It is what I am responding to and collaborating with. Responding to and collaborating with Buddha. Service rests on the basic premise that the nature of life is sacred, that life is a holy mystery, which has an unknown purpose. When we serve, we know that we belong to life and to that purpose, to that unknown purpose. Fundamentally, helping, fixing, and service are ways of seeing life. And when you help, you see life as weak. When you fix, you see life as broken. When you serve, you see life as whole. From the perspective of service, we're all connected. All suffering is like my suffering. All joy is like my joy. The impulse to serve emerges naturally and inevitably from that way of seeing. Those distinctions make sense? So these two pieces from Joko are quite lovely. Our Zen practice, which is grounded in the Buddhist teachings that Peg explicated in brief, and drew from some of the early ones and even later on, invites us to relinquish ordinary way of meeting the world, some of those I just talked about, in which we attempt to essentially protect ourselves from the reality of life. You know, most of our strategies are about trying to protect ourselves from life as it is. And most of that's habitual and out of our awareness. And in some ways, the strategies work to kind of halt the flow of experience and make permanent what actually is always changing. You know, that old phrase, stop the world, I want to get off. You know, it's like I don't want it to be this world, I want it to be the one I like. And taken further, it's like the Woody Allen quote, he said, I don't have anything against dying, I just don't want to be there when it happens. You know, it's that kind of way we try to separate ourselves. Because we attempt to divide the seamless, the interdependent flow of reality, separating things and people. That's why I started with connecting, you know, in order to maintain some sense of personal control in a world that's always changing due to inevitable causes and conditions, which we can't always put our finger on. But so we make fluid experience into static beliefs and artificially segment time as if it were handed out in these small sequential packets, and do whatever we can to forestall the realization of our own death and prevent the actuality of aging. Ursula Le Guin, you know, wonderful writer, she said, to learn which questions are unanswerable and to not answer them, the skill is most needful in times of stress and darkness. We find ourselves. Our practice really doesn't offer us some new coping strategy, which we can then call spiritual. And it doesn't provide consolation in the forms that our personality demands. Our practice thwarts these efforts and offers us something more. And the things that the Buddha was describing, something beyond comprehension and yet completely realizable in our body. There's a freedom we open to as we set aside our attempts to just manage our suffering, and which expresses itself as all these qualities, which when you were connected a while ago, you may not have been named for, but you long for and you want to continue, like Peg, which is like generosity, patience, vitality, wisdom, kindness, those qualities we started with in the first night, you know. But first we have to soften our grip on what we hold so strongly to in the face of our vulnerability and fear. So you still with me? Yeah. So here are the two main spiritual workarounds that I've noticed in my life. So you see, the first one is, let's say, give it over to someone or something else in a childish way. The teacher will fix it, or God will fix it, or something. Not in a mature way in which we realize we can't do it alone. That's a more mature sense, like, I'm not going to give it up, it's just I realize I can't do it alone. One is immature submission, and the other is immature surrender. And that's the important distinction. So that's one workaround. I won't be responsible, I'll give it up. The other one is to get toughened up by being broken down and rebuilt. This sort of unwholesome submission leads to a false strength of getting a kind of a strength over stuff. I'll dominate it, you know. I'll get broken down and be tough, you know, it's like the Marine way. Instead of having the strength to, instead of over, strength and service. So these are different forms of clinging and grasping and becoming and suffering. Do these two, you know these two? Yeah, I don't want to be responsible, I'll be hyper responsible. most of practice is, and Joko was talking about this, is surrender or relinquishment. Ultimately, it's kind of like a form of concession. And some of you know my little cheeky way of talking about the concession that comes with practice. Because people will say, well, if you do this, what does it lead to? And they think I'm going to say something exalted. And I say, it means you're going to say something like, okay, I'll live my life. I give up. I will, okay. But it's kind of like coming to retreat, isn't it? You negotiate and try and do all these things, like, oh, okay, I'll just keep coming and I'll follow the schedule I want to do. But not as a way of some sort of masochistic, dominant, not that. It's like choosing. It's like Joko said, it's not any different than then just living your life. Abraham Lincoln. I've been driven many times upon my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I had nowhere else to go. My own vision and that of all about me seemed insufficient for that day. So what is it that we concede? Here's my list. Let's see if they match your list. First one's easy, preferences. Follow the schedule. Engage the forms fully. Once again, not submitting to them. Peg and Flint want us to do this. It's not that. But making a space for realizing who and what we are, what this life is. When we offer ourselves to something that's not our preference, you start realizing what life is in a very different way. Second one, I have 6 of these. Habits. I mean, this isn't hard. When we agree to follow what's requested, say yes, as a form of mindful attention, rather than operating on autopilot, we begin to kind of wake up to what our habits are, and then we have choice. And choice is liberating. The concession of our habits. Another one is of our body in a certain way. And this is kind of when we ask ourselves to hold a certain posture, not hold as in hold, I mean, take a certain posture in stillness and silence and offer our body to Zazen and begin to realize our awareness and our embodiment of who we are and appreciate our life. And as we walk together and that we're not separate, we begin to enter this kind of embodied immediacy, which is very different than the way we think about stuff. And you can't figure this out. It just starts to happen as we move together and work together, including all of your habits and beliefs and preferences about how people walk too slow or whatever. And then the next one is beliefs. We have to concede our beliefs. Release beliefs without immediately substituting them for new beliefs. That's a hard one. Okay, I won't believe this, but then suddenly one comes in like without even asking, as if we need them. We clutch at certainty in this world of endless change and flux. But it's like treading water in the ocean when if you relax, you float. Number 5, conceding views. Releasing all of our personal perspectives and our views and engaging what we call, don't know mind or beginner's mind. We meet and release we meet all the views, they come up and then release them, and then meet them again, release them, and that doesn't stop. That's something that we continue to practice with. And last on my list, this list I made is time. We concede our own way of thinking about time and we follow a schedule. And we release doing this. We're going to have work practice later, where you engage fully in what's in front of you. And soften our enslavement to the pressure of time and rest into time. So I don't know if any of these resonate with you, but these are some of the concessions. And what it leads to, I think, is a kind of humility, a softening. One of the researchers at the University of Wisconsin, Ellen Kesavir, I've spoken about that research on humility they're doing before. This great quote, she said, humble people are able to tolerate an honest look at themselves and non-defensively accept their weaknesses alongside their strengths. That's quite a lot just in that sense. And that's what this concession allows. Is that kind of shift. And so I'll bring it back to something a student sent me recently. So these are her words. She said, I found my surrender. It was under a rock. For one, I kept tossing over the fence, only to find it again the next day in my yard. This untraceable tether bound us together. I've lost count of the number of times I've tried to rid myself of that rock. As rocks go, it's not very attractive. It has too many pits and grooves to feel smooth to the touch. The surface is the texture of sandpaper. Seeing it always wore me down. The color is dull, almost the color of asphalt. So you can already tell the drawing you're going to make here. It weighs less than an ordinary paperweight, but more than a bone. I love that line. I suppose, though, I have no recall or reason to believe this is true, but that rock and I have shared many lifetimes together. I think it knows more about me than I know about myself. It definitely has more patience than I do when it comes to faith. It doesn't fight words or get fearful of what it knows and won't admit. Fearful of what it knows and won't admit. It doesn't get restless and angry because it wants to know why or what for. It hasn't any aspirations or secret need to be affirmed. It only is as only is. That is trusting, truthful, courageous, simple, and sanguine. Second part. Instead of throwing the rock over the fence today, when I stepped on it, I picked it up and examined it. That's when I saw, in the ground underneath, a tiny pool whose source led me to a tributary of an underground spring. I imagine that this opening has been there under my feet long before time began. This rock that I treated like a barrier, a thorn, a reminder of all my flaws, was actually trying to lead me home. To inside myself, where I was wanting to go all along, to discover my true self. Joko was talking about being. To admit, as in to allow entry, to admit someone, to allow entry into my heart, the facets and flaws that are uniquely me. So I could ascend to the discovery that those same facets and flaws that are uniquely me are not all that unique within the universal. And how do we set down the rock and touch the spring? Go for it. And just breathe. I'm thinking of every one of you on the screen there. See your hands, see your faces. Stretching our hearts out across all of the space. Are you receiving or are you giving? Or is that falling away? Sometimes just to be together is enough. And when no other hands are available, we do that. Put them together. Bow to each other. Think of this. Now don't hurt yourself, but make it like not comfortable. And look at it. And then say to yourself inside silently, this is suffering. That you're doing. And slowly, really slowly let it start softening. That weird kind of hokey way that pops and moves. Let your hand slowly open. And as you look at it, say to yourself, this is the release of suffering. Feel it. And then with that open hand, say to yourself, I am subject to suffering and the release of suffering. I am subject to suffering and its release. And then opening that hand out to others and looking around and looking on the screen, and so are others subject to suffering and its release. Okay. One more time. Thank you very much.
Dan, may I ask who wrote the poem?
About the rock? I can't remember if she gave me permission or not, but I think that she did, because I have it in two places, which usually happens if I'm taking it out. It's a therapist friend of mine here in town, Elaine Tuccio. As she was studying the Genja poem, this was her response to the Genja poem. Since we have a couple of minutes, anything you want to say or respond to anything you said? Just a couple of minutes. Yes.
Probably start crying when I say this, but the touch just reminded me of I just had all these memories of past just gentle touches in my life.
Yeah.
My mom holding my hand as she was dying. I had this like very vivid memory of John Eric just putting his hand on my shoulder. Just all these memories came to me. And it felt very intimate and timeless and connecting. And
You are. Intimate, timeless, connected. Where is memory located? Not your head.
Question about earlier on, you spoke about for being in service not as a sacrifice, but as a, realizing that you're both giving and receiving at the same time. But can you speak a little bit about the pitfalls or the pros, cons, caveats of harnessing selfish or sort of self-centered motivations? Like, there's a simple toy example. You go to your friend's house, they're struggling to mop the floor, they're using the mop all wrong. You get irritated, and you're like, no, this is how you do it. And you're helping them out, but there's multiple things happening there. And what's what are some caveats?
That's a really great example. Okay, and the part that's missing, where the Buddha comes in, is turning to the person and say, do you want any help? And if they say no, then you have to just bow and step back. And if they say yes, you say, is it okay if I offer a suggestion? And you get the next assent. It's about permission. We have all kind of ideas, but if you don't have permission and agreement, it becomes some form of violence. And if we just swallow and never do anything, it's another form of violence this way. I think one of the keys.
That said, someone coming into a practice container is implicitly giving permission for certain kinds of corrections, for certain kinds of instruction or support. That's assumed. So it's not every time that someone's going to say,
Right. Yeah.
you always bow or enter the Zen.
And when we give it, we want to make sure we don't do it in a way that'll end up being shaming
That's right.
or public or something. You know, we have to be sensitive to that too. So it's always, there's always an edge, and where do you meet it? At being skillful. Okay. And now, notice how walking together is intimate. And so our attending to each other, not letting big gaps happen, not being pushy, just really attending to the wholeness and moving together. Of course it's clumsy, and of course there are difficulties, and it's dear as we walk each other home.
We have a lot of people in a small space, so attending to the overall sort of organic system that we have would be really helpful for everyone.
One body walking, not just you.
Many legs.
Prepare for kinhin.